Hi, this is Bill Hitchcock, and we're going to be working through some things with Chapter 3 on charts. So here you can see I've got a spreadsheet where I've got a documentation sheet, and the file that the chapter actually covers, the computer-related jobs. So we're going to start out with a quick review on the documentation sheet. You can see I've got the page numbers in already. I'm going to enter in my name. So don't forget to do that for yourself. Type in the date that you complete your work on. And then let's also update my worksheet down here. So this is E03H1 computer jobs. So comp jobs. And we'll estimate it's going to take us about a half an hour to do that one. I'll hit Control Home. I'm going to group all my sheets, so I'll right-click on the Sheet tab, select all the sheets, go to the page layout, go to Print Titles, choose Header and Footer, and update my name in here. Check everything else. Let's see, I've got the title, I've got the date printed, that's looking good. I want to check my footer, file, page, number of the total pages, and then my sheet tab. That looks good. I want to check my margins, about a ½ inch each, that should be fine. And the page for this one, I think portrait is going to be okay. If we need to adjust it, we can. So we'll do a quick print preview. There's my documentation sheet. The headers and footers all look good. And check the next page, and that looks like that's fitting on one page as well. So far so good. So let's go back. Let's ungroup these sheets. So right click on the Sheet tab, ungroup them. Save your file. And let's start our work. All right, like always, I'm never crazy about how they've set up some of these data sheets. I think there's some things that we can do to improve them. One of the things I notice, it looks as though they actually have a blank row in between here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight rows 3 and 5, and then just try to adjust the row height on them to see what's going on here. So here they've got row 4. And I understand why they might have squeezed that one down just to give the appearance of having these center titles above there. They did the same thing down at the bottom. So I'm going to try to adjust that row height. And we've got that in there, a blank line before we have the source of where we got this information. So, it's a good idea to have the source of the information. Let's just decide how we want to handle this with our spreadsheet. So anyways, I want to make a few adjustments here. And I'm going to get rid of this blank row. Don't really need that. I want to give each one of these columns a field name. So this is the job or the occupation. And we can take a look through this and see if there's any particular way that they have this sorted. It looks as though it was sorted by the number of jobs in 2010 in descending order. But without knowing that for sure, I still think it's always a good idea to insert a blank column here. Come up with a record number or an occupation number, something like that. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I might as well just type it in. Before, I had done the trick where highlight 1, 2, and 3 and then just double click on the fill handle to extend that series. But with only 7 records, we really don't need to do it there. I will, however, format those with a comma format. And now that I've done that, I want to take my title and stretch that across all of these cells. So I'll unmerge it and then remerge that back over. I can narrow up this column. The other thing is, I said before, putting in borders just wastes ink when you print it out. So let's get rid of the borders. Later on, once we're all done with everything, we might decide that we want to put in some just for visual, kind of a visual grouping of some of the data. But usually, again, I would try to avoid that. Notice row 7 here looks a little bit larger than the other rows. So I'm going to just double click between 11 and 12 and see if I narrow that one up so that way all those are the same size. All right, let's take a look here. We've got some data typed in. We've got the number of new jobs, so that was just subtracting the 2020 estimate minus what we had in 2010. And then we can copy that formula down. The growth, that looks like it's just hard-coded numbers in there. So let's just take a quick look and see if that percent growth is equal to the change in the number of jobs divided by however many jobs we started out in 2010. So that's given me 22, well, if I round this off, 22%. I can copy this down, and sure enough, it looks like as I'm comparing these numbers, it looks like we're getting the same result. So really, rather than hard coding those numbers, we'd want to use the formula. So let's type that in, equals the number of jobs divided by what our 2010 amount was. And I'm going to format that, and I'll justify those numbers. You can decide if you want to add an extra decimal point in there. Might not be bad if somebody's really looking for specifics. Just showing this rounded off to the nearest percent is probably just fine. Again, kind of your choice. And then we've got the median pay in 2010. Well, we can take a look at that. Right, something else that we might want to try doing is we can get the average annual percent growth. And the average annual percent growth basically is, how much would this number have to change on an annual basis to get us up to 2020? So let's see if we can test this out. The formula for doing it is you say it equals the future value, which is our 2020 estimate, divided by the present value, in this case 2010. And I'll take that and raise that to a power. And really what we're doing is we're taking the nth root of that number. By the nth root, we've got 2010, so we're going 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 10 years. So I want to take this to the 10th root, or the 1/10 power. It gives me 102%, but then what I need to do is I need to take that and subtract off 1, and it gives me, it's a 2.0% growth rate. So comparing that for some of these, you can see software application developers, it looks like the industry is supposed to grow at 2.5%. So now we want to test this out and see if we get the right numbers. So we'll have our 2011 estimate. I want the 2012, 13, 14, 15, all the way out to 2020. And notice by typing in a number and just dragging that across, it assumes the correct series. So in 2011, I'm going to have what my 2010 number was times my growth rate. And I always want to use that, so I'm going to put an absolute reference in front of the column. And then I want to add that to my 2010 amount. So I'm estimating that I've got 55,000 jobs. I can copy that one down. Do the same kind of thing for 2012. Now I want to take this amount times the 2%. And I want to add that to my 2011 estimate. Notice it's rounding this off. It's giving me some fractional numbers of jobs, which, there we might argue, all right, should we really round this number off and do things? But for now, we can kind of cheat, if you will, and we'll just use the comma format to make it look as though we've got those numbers. So now finally I can take this, copy it all the way across, and if everything worked right, it looks like in 2020 I've got 664,800. So indeed, my average annual growth rate did work for all of those cells. So here's the last one, 144,800. That's what we got after stretching this out for the 20 years. So just little tricks, little things that we can add onto our spreadsheet to add a little bit of value, if you want to think of it that way. All right, other things that I would encourage you to do. Let's get the grand total for all these jobs. If this is for the entire IT industry, so why don't we just call it total IT jobs. Let's sum this up. So I can use my auto sum. Only problem with using auto sum is it's going to group in there 2010. And in this case, I really don't want that because it's going to assume it's a number and it's going to add that in. So I'm going to change this just to row 5. I can copy this across. I can copy that over to all of these numbers. And we got to make a few changes here. Let's see, the percent growth, I'm going to copy that down from here. So it looks like we're going from about 2.5 million jobs to over 3 million jobs, an increase of roughly 500,000. You can see 560,000. A 22.4% overall growth. And I want to copy in my average annual growth rate to the comparison. On average, it's growing about 2% per year. And we can widen out these columns so I can display them. The only problem is if you look, you'll see our page breaks are getting just a little bit too wide. So, couple options that I have. One is change the layout, change the orientation, see how that works. The only problem is, in a way, it'd be nice if we could keep all these estimates on one sheet. So I'm going to change the orientation back to portrait. And I'm going to take these cells and let's shrink this font size down a bit. Try 9. And then we'll narrow that up. And that's not too bad. Okay, other things that we can do. Now we want to start making some charts. So let's save our work and try out one of the charts that they say. So, the easiest way to chart something out is say that I want to get the number of new jobs. So I can highlight that data choose Insert, try a column chart, and there I've got something where, hey, this works. It looks like for some reason programmers is a little bit low, but software application developers, those working on cell phones and smartphones, that sort of thing, it looks like that part of the business is going up. The only problem is down here on the x-axis, I just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we could fix that a couple ways. One is if I go up to Select Data, I can choose the horizontal axis category, and then I'm going to select my jobs, hit OK, and there it is. There's the number of new jobs. It's identified by the labels. Not too bad. Keep in mind, visualization experts say, rather than showing a chart something like this, what we ought to do is take this and change the chart type, and they'd recommend using a bar chart instead. The reason is because we've got these fairly long occupation labels here, and that way our charts, the orientation is wider rather than is taller, so therefore we can drag that out. And then I'm just going to drag this out a little bit bigger so it's easier to read the x-axis label out here. I'm just going to move this off to the side so we can see that off to the side that way. The other thing that we could do with this is we could actually take this chart and put it to a new sheet. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move the chart location. I'm going to call this my, we'll call it number of jobs bar chart. And we've got one chart done. So let's move that to the end. Let's come back here. Now, if you sort this data in any particular way, it's going to affect the chart. So let's save my work. I want to sort this by the number of new jobs. So let's do this from smallest to largest. So database administrators, programmers, CIS managers, and so on. And now let's take a look at our chart. And there you've got it with the software developer apps being the largest bar and going down like that. So really, in that case, if you're going to do a chart, that's almost a better way of doing it. The other argument that you might make is really what we should do is we should order this by the occupation and have it alphabetical. So if I make those alphabetical, that way if you're looking for a specific job, you can look through these things alphabetically and identify what they are. So that's kind of what we had at the beginning of this. But as I say, visualization experts, they would say show it in this order, so that way our longest bar is up at the top. It works easier for people to understand what the information is that we're seeing, because this way, if you look at database administrators, they're somewhere in the 30,000 range, and software app developers is close to 140,000, so figure almost 5 times the size of that. That could even be another bit of data that you could add in here, is we could find out what our minimum number of jobs are and what the maximum is. So I'm going to insert a few more rows here. So we'll do the average, the min, the max, and I'm going to add one more. And we'll say the, what do we want to call it? The times max bigger than the min. So here's my average, equals average And we'll average up all those. We'll do equals min. Equals max. And now I want to know the max divided by the min tells me how many times bigger that maximum is over the minimum. So we'll copy this. And we'll copy it all the way across. Use my format painter to adjust the sizes of all of these. And we want to adjust a couple of things here. Let's see. The average percent growth. I suppose what we could do is we could format these with a percent sign. The average annual growth, we'll do the same thing there. We can format that with a percent sign and carry that out. So let's see, one of the things that we had here, I think I messed up my label on this one. This was the median pay. There it is. Yeah, the median pay for 2010. So let's put that as part of the field name right there. And we can just clear this out of here. All right, so that's looking pretty good. We'll save this. Let's try doing a couple other charts. Another thing that we could do is another way of doing the chart is if you highlight the occupation and all of this data and choose Insert Chart, and we'll make a 2D chart. Here it gives us a pretty basic chart. It's got the chart title, so we're going to want to change that. So let's just type in pound, we'll select it, number of jobs, and we've got our 2010-2020 estimate on here. Let's take our chart, let's move this location, and we'll call it 2010 v 2020 jobs. And we've got a fairly useful graph looking at that. Now the rest of the chapter will run you through a number of different charts, but the main thing that I wanted to show you is, always get thinking about how else could you add some extra value to your data. This way, by setting it up like this, we can sort different ways. We can do that estimate about the average annual growth. We've got some minimums, maximums, just to help us take a look at that information. Let's just double check the page layout on this, see how it turns out. So I've got my first page, I've got the second page, that looks good. And we're all done for today.